Welcome to our wonderful Women in Fintech panel discussion. Super excited to be here this morning to talk with Pavi, Mindy, and Shilpa, three distinguished leaders from across the financial services space. Having spent the last 10 or more years within financial services myself, I understand what a fast moving place it is, how things are really evolving quickly, how there's so much competition in the space. There are legacy providers who are trying to become tech companies. There are tech companies trying to understand the regulation, and there are startups disrupting it all. I think we're going to have a great conversation. But just to ease us into it and get everybody settled, let's start with a few rapid fire questions so we get to know each other a little bit better. First of all, what's your favorite holiday? And I'll start with Pavi.
My favorite holiday is being at home with all members of the family in my family room, watching TV, eating takeout food. That to me trumps everything else.
Awesome. Shilpa.
Well, I live in Bellevue, east side of the Seattle area, and we have like Cascades on the other side and Olympics. I love going to the mountains and the lakes and the rivers and just explore the beautiful Pacific here.
That sounds magnificent. And Mindy, over to you.
I have two, either Park City, kind of at any time of year, or a beachy resort are my favorite holidays.
Ooh, +1 on Park City. We love that. Tell me a little bit about a chore that you absolutely despise. And I have to chime in here and say, I can wash, I can dry laundry, I can fold it. I just hate to put it away.
Oh, for me, it's folding laundry. I love to collect buckets after buckets of unfolded laundry. I just moved into a new home, so I have my own closet where I can hide them all away.
Good plan. Mindy.
Putting away the laundry. I'm the same. I can do every other part of it, I don't mind, but putting it away at the end is just really painful for me.
I know we need to train our family members better. Shilpa.
I think I'm right there with you all. I love actually cleaning, I love arranging all of that. But when it comes to just organizing the laundry and the clothes and folding it, it's just not my thing.
Okay, I think there's an opportunity for a business here somewhere. Where do you all like to go when you want to be alone? And let's start with Shilpa this time.
I think I'd go for a walk again. Like we live in the kind of the hills around in the beautiful Bellevue area. So just taking a quiet walk along would actually clear up my.
Great way to regenerate. Pavi.
I also like to go for a walk, but inside a shopping mall where I can just do window shopping and I can just keep walking. No one to bother me, no one to ask me when I'm coming home. Just the whole day doing nothing.
Sounds like heaven. Mindy.
I had walk as well. I have two young kids, two cats, a dog, my husband, and my parents all living in one house. And so the only alone time is to be found outside the house for sure.
That's great. I'll one up you all and say I love to run, but particularly with my earpods on so that I can listen to things as I run. And then lastly, we're all in fintech today, but tell me, what career did you dream of when you were a child? Mindy, we'll start with you.
I always wanted to be a singer, specifically like a pop singer.
Wow, maybe later we'll get a chance. Pavi.
I actually didn't have one. I did not have career because most oftentimes the understanding was you're born and brought up in India, you follow an engineering path or a professional, STEM kind of an education, and then do just the basic thing of like settling in a software tech job. So I didn't have any aspirations of like being a pop singer, although that sounds great. I think being pampered was is a good thing. So hopefully, sometime in the future.
That's great. And Shilpa.
I actually wanted to be a dancer. I actually learned dance for several years. I've given a lot of performances, but then life just moved on and I had to give up. But yeah, here I am.
And since product management didn't always exist, I doubt any of us had product management as our plan. But mine was very far away. I wanted to be a vet, so I guess here we all are. So maybe we'll get down to the business at hand and say, start with one of our questions. So technology companies really pioneered the space of product management. And fintech have taken that to the next level. It's a super exciting space, but there's a lot of nuance to being a product manager within fintech. Can you maybe each describe to us what the role of product management is in your organization, and what you look for? And maybe Mindy, will start with you.
Yeah, so at American Express, the role of the product team is really to create those experiences and products that will stretch across the customer's life cycle, and just ensure that our customers are getting, an industry-leading experience, and industry-leading services. I think American Express is probably somewhat unique in the broader fintech landscape in that we well predate product management as a discipline. And so product is relatively young within the company. I think as a result of that, there is still a little bit of experimentation and growth that we're in the midst of doing now, just to really understand exactly what product does mean at Amex. What I can say is that one of the intentional aspects of the design of the product organization is that it really cuts across our lines of business. And so just for example, I lead our acquisition products and platforms, and that cuts across consumer and commercial, across all of our markets and all of our product types. And so it's really designed to give an equally insightful, but probably alternative lens into the customer's experiences, with really a deep view into a horizontal, whereas our marketing teams are really designed to get that deep view into the vertical.
Very interesting perspective. Pavi, tell us a little bit about how it is for you.
So, not to repeat what Cindy was just talking about being product managers, being at the core of what the consumer wants. At Upstart, we have our product management team working lockstep with our engineering teams to drive the roadmap vision and to see it blossom into reality in terms of product launches. For us, we are in the personal lending, digital lending market. So that means understanding what the target addressable market looks like, what avenues can we foray into, how many billions of dollars of originations we can make, and then translating that into a vision, having clear-cut requirements that engineering can work on is paramount to our company's success, because they are crucial to laying out the plan for accelerated revenue growth, and those ideas come from them, right? So especially with digital lending, more and more consumers are now turning away from their main first banks and then moving into the fintech space. They're considering, companies like us, which are offering traditional financial services, but we are not a banking industry per se, and they are sharing a lot more of that data. So product managers bridge that kind of a crucial gap between engineering, the market, the consumer, and how to give them the seamless user experience so that the consumers, over a period of time, return to the platform not just for one loan, look at all the product offerings and are able to leverage the platform, is what we call success. And the more originations that we do coming from the same repeat customers then makes it very clear to us that this model is a success.
Sounds super exciting. Shilpa, maybe you can touch on how it works at Intuit, and why you think it's super interesting to be there and be in product management.
Yeah. Intuit has been innovating itself over 4 decades, more than that, right? Especially in the fintech industry. Now, there are a few principles that are very broadly applicable for any function because it's core to our DNA in terms of how we operate. We are a very mission-driven company, and customers are at the front and center of everything that we do. There are a couple of processes called CDI, what we call customer-driven innovation, and the second one is Design for Delight, D4D. So these are two frameworks and processes that we have that every new hire, every employee in the company goes through to develop deep empathy for customers, such that you are driven to innovate on behalf of your customers every day. You wake up in the morning thinking about how do you make the life of your customers better every day, every minute, every second. Now, we actually also do follow me homes. What we mean by that is we literally actually spend time with our customers. We follow their day of what a business work life would look like and understand what challenges are they going through, what works and what doesn't work. And that's core to innovation at Intuit. Now, product managers are at the front and center of driving many of these CDI and follow me homes and customer driven innovation approaches in the company. We operate as a triad, meaning a product and an engineering and the design work together as a mission, take a customer problem, obsess about that customer problem, and work as a mission team to drive this customer research to ultimately identify that customer benefit, the job that we need to do extremely, extremely well. And then we build the rest of the product requirements, the experience designs. We take those back to the customers. We do research with the customers. We understand their feedback, and we continue to iterate. So what I've seen at Intuit, like a successful PM at Intuit would have had a deep customer empathy and instincts that's backed by data. We have tons of data that we use to ultimately provide the best and best and best experience for our customers that we're constantly working on. We want to think big and set bigger goals, but we also have a concept of go broad to go narrow. So we want to start with a bigger, broader problem, but we also need to narrow it down to that single unit of delight for customers. And then we are constantly and relentlessly debating, redefining, tinkering, experimenting, iterating on that until we land the right outcome for the customers. And product managers are at the front and center of driving this for our customers.
Sounds like a super exciting role there at Intuit. I'm going to move on to another question. I'm going to start with you, Pavi, given your expertise in the security area. So financial services has always been a highly regulated space, but since 2008, it's become more and more so. And as so many of our companies are global in nature, we need to think about regulatory, security, and privacy aspects around the world. Do you feel that PMs need to have this expertise coming into the company? Is it something they can learn on the job? How do you recommend that people get started and not get off-put by all of this, all of the rules and regulations that need to be followed?
I don't think you need to have a basic understanding of the company that you're working for, right? What is their business model? What are they in the market for? What makes them successful? What are the pitfalls, right? So I would say that whether you are in product management, whether you're in engineering or security, my guidance would be spend the first month learning the ins and outs of how the product works, what works, what doesn't, right? And then understand in a fintech space, what are the regulatory obligations that your company has? Is it GLBA? Is it the Bank Secrecy Act? Is it like anti-money laundering? So understanding all of that, and then understanding simple things like, hey, you show a customer a consent form, it is mandated that you actually don't just have a checkbox, but you actually show them the form, right? So there is a user experience that is very much seamlessly built into it. And it may seem like a trivial thing, but not showing something or the fine print in a privacy policy will come back to bite you, right? So those are some of the key baseline understanding that you either have as you come into the job or you develop the first few months of the job, right? So once you do that, then product management doesn't really just fit in the product world, right? There is regulatory tech that you can be a product manager for. There is compliance that you could be a product manager for. There are product features that translate directly into revenue that you could be a manager for. So understanding what your areas are, having that cross-functional collaboration with all of the other product teams. For example, launching a product feature, am I, first of all, do I have all the regulatory controls built in? Am I, conveying to the customer what data I'm ingesting and how I'm using that data from a privacy point of view? Can I follow the data all the way through? So these are all requirements that the product manager would very clearly lay out for engineering to then say, hey, this data is masked in our systems, this data is encrypted, make sure that this consent is shown, make sure that when a customer says, from a privacy point of view, forget about me, that we are able to do that and we are able to follow the data through. So all of this in my mind is whether you belong to a product management role or you're sitting in some of these sister teams, it is all how you think about what the experience needs to be. And then security by itself is an entirely bigger wrapper around the whole thing, right? Security in any tech industry is key, in any health industry is key. But then you now talk about security in a fintech world where attackers are very keen to look for any ways that they can get their hands on consumer data, how they can monetize the information that they have, how they can sell it on the dark web. So a security team or a security professional within the fintech space has a lot more obligation and responsibility to safeguard a consumer data, because we deal with enormous amounts of data. So how do you reassure the customer that, hey, I have your data and I have it safe and we are protecting it, and here is how. And then when you share that data with third parties, how do you ensure that data is shared in a safe manner? Because now a data that arrives from one source is now all over the place, right? So it's a tremendous obligation and it's a tremendous responsibility on our part to ensure that that data at all times remains safe. So any sort of security testing, we call it a shift left approach, like finding a bug or a security issue which results in a brand reputation or eroding trust in the brand or a financial damage is so much harder to fix and so much harder to recover from. Whereas if you have a shift left approach in security where we keep finding the bugs earlier on and we keep moving left so that the developers and the product teams have a chance to address it before it hits the internet is really what we are striving for. And the cost of fixing a bug pre-production as opposed to post-production is very expensive. Product managers, it was always in engineering and it was security's responsibility, but here in our company, given the fact that we work very closely together, product management actually builds in that testing time or time allocation in engineering to address those kind of issues before it hits. Yes, it's not an afterthought, it's not an appendage. It's built as part of your software development lifecycle.
Great. And Mindy, given Amex's long history within the financial services sector, I'm sure there's a ton of information and understanding of the regulatory security environment. Maybe you could share a little bit about how you think about getting PMs up to speed in that environment.
Yeah, I think, we certainly don't expect a PM or PO to step in with a deep understanding of the regulatory landscape, but you do have to step in knowing that it is a reality that you do live day to day, to the point just made. So I think with that said, we have a wealth of trainings and resources and tools that are there to do two things. One is to give a more specific and deeper set of knowledge to our product teams around the regulations that most directly impact the product space that they're supporting, and in particular the markets that they're supporting those experiences or products in. And then second, with that kind of grounding in what regulations really impact what you're doing day to day, we make sure that our product teams are really well equipped to understand how to engage all of the appropriate support teams from the start of the product lifecycle through to the day-to-day maintenance of that lifecycle, to ensure that we're really surfacing throughout the specific requirements that would apply to any particular product work, feature, or initiative that the team is engaging in at that point in time. And it is then part of their role to ensure that the features they're actually building out are sensitive to and compliant with the regulatory or customer or operational excellence considerations that have been laid out as part of that information gathering exercise. So it is really a daily reality for our teams, and it's one that I think we're well equipped to help our product teams navigate. It's one that I actually particularly enjoy. I think it adds a challenge to you need to offer continually an exceptional customer experience, and you have boundaries within which you have to play, right? There are regulatory boundaries around that. And so it's just like a bit of a puzzle piece almost that you have to make work into that exceptional experience. So I enjoy it, but I do think that you really have to have an appetite to work within that if you are considering a career within fintech.
I love that. Sometimes boundaries provide an opportunity for creativity.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. So moving to our next question, all of you have had phenomenal careers and you are now in fintech. I'd love for you to provide to our audience an idea of what you think it takes to be a woman in fintech. How do you feel every day? What's the sort of representation that you see? And what do you think that you brought to the table that made a difference for you, and advice you would offer to our women? Obviously, the organization Women in Product is geared towards parity of representation across all product management levels. So with that in mind, maybe Mindy, we'll start with you and talk to me a little bit about what you see as key to success, both for you and for others coming into the environment today.
Yeah, I think so. Just to start out, in terms of representation, in fintech more broadly, there is definitely an opportunity to increase the representation of women. I have a very dated stat, but in 2018, according to one study, 37% of the fintech workforce were women. I can say at American Express, over half of our global workforce are women, and at the senior leadership level, so SVP and above, it's actually 40%. And so that's something that I'm personally actually quite proud of. In terms of what it takes to succeed, I spent some time introspecting on this question, and I actually really think for me, where I have experienced what I believe were some of the more important or meaningful or pivotal successes, the thing that's really been true in those moments is that I have felt I had a really strong, supportive, and safe space with both my leaders, but also with mentors and kind of peers and mentors outside of just my direct organization, where I really had the continued and ongoing support to grow and to bring my authentic self into work every day and really grow around that, right? And I do think that that's actually just a very important thing for someone thinking about their career or how to start it or how to navigate it or grow it, is taking a step back and really understanding what makes you happy and fulfilled and what truly does lead to you waking up in the morning actually excited about the challenges that you're going to tackle that day. And look for teams and for companies that can help you get there. Having a leader that can really recognize you as your authentic self and create that space to grow is so important. And it's also not enough to only have that leader. You need to be able to find a few of those individuals that you can really connect with and turn to for support and a sounding board, and just to generally be part of your journey. And so for me, I think that's actually really quite important. And I would say just the last note to this is to look before you think you need to make a move. Because if you wait until the point at which you're ready to leave where you're at, whether it's for a new company or just a new role, then that's when I personally have found my decision making starts to get a little bit blurred, because I start to make decisions for reasons outside of just what is going to set me up for success. There are also financial considerations and all of those constraints that start to come into play if you leave it just a little bit too long. So hopefully that answers the question.
Super sound advice. Let me push a little bit on one area that I know is dear to the hearts of many of our women in product. You talked a lot about finding mentors or a personal board of directors, but people struggle with this. Do you have any hints about how you can, approach mentors in a way that is comfortable for both?
Yeah, I think two things. So one is people often look for mentors that are senior, and that is important. But what I can say is that actually look for mentors in your peer set as well. There were points at which I was trying to make a move into a new content area for product. I actually sought out the mentorship of one of my peers in particular. She was already in that area and quite successful. She ended up becoming my leader, was quite quick to hire me when she herself had gotten a promotion opportunity. And I can say that what started out as a peer relationship that I had shaped into a bit of a mentorship relationship ended up being one of the relationships that accelerated my career the most in the end. And so I think people focus almost exclusively on more senior leaders. And I wouldn't necessarily advise that, right? Think about who will be well placed to support you regardless of their band level, and have some of those individuals that are peers in that mix as well as individuals that are senior. I think the second thing is, I often see people reaching out to individuals that they don't know and trying to create mentorship relationships there. And my observation is that if you can make building those mentorship and sponsorship connections part of your day-to-day activity, and try to nurture and then build on relationships that might start as working relationships. Maybe someone's on the steering committee of a project that you're on, or they've had the ability, the opportunity to hear you present or something. Like people who have some reason to know you, start there and try and deepen those relationships there, because I think those are far easier to forge and then maintain in the longer run than relationships where really that person doesn't know you. And so their advice is going to be quite generic. And, the connection's just that much harder to build, I think, in those instances.
Thank you. Really, really helpful. Shilpa, would love to hear a little bit about your experience and recommendations. No, sorry, back to the original question around, representation of females within fintech, what you think females bring to the table, what's helped you, and what might help other women who are looking to get into fintech.
Yeah, for sure. I think the first and foremost thing I'll say is I don't think anything is impossible. Honestly, I think just even my personal journey, really, right? I'm an engineer, I'm a technologist, I'm an engineering leader. But over the last decade, I've started kind of expanding my scope because I was just curious to learn how do we define what customer needs are. So I started expanding to product and leading business and operations, ultimately kind of growing into a GM role to have broader perspective of how do we land right customer outcomes, right business outcomes. And then even joining Intuit from where I was at Microsoft and Amazon, e-commerce, gaming to fintech is a very different journey relative to many others. I think what I will say is two things, right? One, even I think fintech as an industry is evolving, right? So the way finance operated a decade ago is very different from what we are seeing now and what it will be, a decade from now. So I think really this is also an area where every one of us can relate to, right? Like every this the space about finance is relatable to every single person in this globe. We're all transacting one way or the other. We had an experience of what it is. We're constantly seeing digital wallets, crypto, blockchain, so many of it evolving. The core of it is really find your passion. What do you want to do? Like what drives you? What do you wake up in the morning excited about? And I think when you have an understanding of your passion, I will say look for people who can help you and shape and formulate that. Often you think about an idea, but then you need additional insights from those that have gone through that journey or have been in that journey to further frame and build your conviction to double down on your passion, right? And then, really, I would say a lot of it is research. Spend time learning and learning and learning. Learning and being curious is extremely, extremely important, especially for everybody, as a matter of fact, especially in the product team, because you are at the front and center of driving innovation. You need to be intimately aware of your customers, your company, your industry, your domain, etc. So, spending time on that, seeking for experts, allocating time for learning is very, very, very important. And the last one I'll touch upon is, as Mindy was stating about like mentors. I think that is very, very important as well. I have benefited a lot from folks who have leaned in to help me, give me different opportunities, and help me like kind of really push the boundaries and challenge myself into different. Uh, Totally uncomfortable, totally unaware of situations, but I think having that support system around you would be really helpful. But a lot of it is being there and driving and pushing yourself, challenging yourself every day. A lot of resources are available around, and I would say there's so many people who are seeking to help. And so ask for help. Never, ever, ever hesitate to ask for help.
I love that. Asking for help is so crucial at every level. I think we've gotten some really good advice for our audience here. So thank you both. I do want to touch on another question. Fintech is evolving so quickly. As you mentioned a little bit, Shilpa, there's crypto, there's blockchain, there's artificial intelligence, there's so much going on. What do you believe is the future of fintech, and why should we all be excited, especially people who maybe are new to fintech? And Pavi, maybe we'll start with you here.
Uh, as I said, there's just a wealth of opportunity in fintech, right? So Upstart, we ourselves are in the lending space. Shilpa talked about blockchain. I made a reference to regulatory tech. There's insurance, capital markets. I think just looking at the US market, there is an enormous amount of market that we haven't yet tapped into that more fintech companies are trying to see. Upstart itself went from personal lending to auto, which is like $1 trillion market. Then you have small loans that we see a lot of. Every time you go into an Amazon to make a purchase in Amazon, it asks you, hey, do you want to use a firm to buy something? Do you want a small loan? So you can see that fintech has now creeped into, or you see that evident in everyday world, right? whether you're shopping at Macy's, you're Amazon, you see those little bits and pieces all over the place, right? So it's coming, and it's coming to the consumer, where the consumer doesn't have to go looking for it. Like, hey, I need a loan. Like, even if the consumer does not need a loan, it's in their face all the time, right? So finding out what makes sense for your organization in terms of a business model, or to kind of radically say, hey, we did personal lending, let's go look at something vastly different, because we have a technology that can support it, even though it's not a business that we have been looking into. Our underlying technology is so sound, our artificial intelligence and our machine learning models can kind of easily pivot and deflect to undertake another technology. That's pretty cool, right? So the future for fintech, I think, is we're only trying to scrape at the surface, and even in just one space, right? Whether it's personal lending or auto, there is just a vast thing, and mortgage is huge. Everyone needs a loan, everyone needs a car, everyone at some point is going to buy a house and would need a mortgage, or to finance their credit card bills, or to pay their rent. So it's not going away at all. So
And customer expectations are just increasing rapidly as
and
the
even if you didn't have
experience.
one, right? That's the cool part. Even if you didn't have an expectation, even if you didn't want something, here I am in your face telling you, but you can buy this if you want to get a loan from here. So um, on the flip side, is it encouraging unwanted spending? Maybe, but that's the whole business model, isn't it?
And so I think, doing all of these things in a responsible way is super important and beholden on all of us. Certainly at Google, we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we use AI and machine learning in a responsible way. And it adds, to your point earlier, Mindy, some constraints around what we do, but it forces innovation within that space. Shilpa, would love to hear what's exciting you about fintech and why you think other people should be excited about it.
I think for me, the first and foremost thing is like fintech is really disrupting how customers or every single human on this planet deserves to have financial access and goodness there. I think fintech is really onto that mission. That's what excites me. That's what really kind of inspires me to be here to provide that financial access and freedom to every single person on this planet. Now, from a technology perspective as well, from as a PM and as a fintech, as a tech industry as well, that is disrupting. There are a lot of interesting trends that are out there, and I will say three of my most interesting ones that I find really exciting are, as you both were talking about, like artificial intelligence, and which I believe will drive massive value creation. I was looking at one of the research reports earlier, and it basically says that fintech AI can actually generate $1 trillion additional value for the global banking industry. And think about all the automation and all the intelligence, how the predictions that we could build there. That's just the opportunities are like phenomenal. The second one, I think, is blockchain will disrupt all the established financial protocols significantly. We're talking about technologies like smart contracts, like zero knowledge proofs, and distributed data storage, exchange. These are all super critical for like digital wallets, and which is so part of core for many of us right now, from wherever it never even was a concept like years ago. Digital assets, NFT. So it's just going to open up so many different possibilities for people to disrupt and leverage. And the last one I'll say is the no code and low code from a technology perspective. Again, this is going to whole degree like redefine application development. It's going to actually give the power of kind of building to the hands of people who can actually build, not just be constrained with application developers or software engineers needing to build. So it's a whole new arsenal that we could give to the hands of innovators to get to the customers and innovate so fast. So beyond all the other exciting opportunities, these are the three things that I think are exciting. It's just phenomenal. It's just the power of innovation, technology, customer experience delight, combined with the core novel idea of generating that core benefit to any customer in the planet is what I think is delightful.
Great response. And I particularly am interested to see the evolution of how regulatory bodies keep up with all of the technology. We know they've struggled a little in the past, but the more ahead of things that we all can be, the better. Mindy, what gets you up and what keeps you coming to work?
Well, I quite like Shilpa's vision of the future there. So that, yeah, I mean, I think fintech, there are so many unmet needs in the financial services space more broadly. And it is such a huge reality for individuals, for companies. Like, so much of our time is spent thinking about managing, resourcing all of our assets. And, some of those needs are met better than others for some segments more than others. And so I think fintech really is just about starting to understand where we can use our insights into those unmet needs, or where we can use our assets and those insights into the unmet needs to actually just start bridging those gaps and making it easier, making financial services more accessible and more friendly for the individuals and companies that need to use them and navigate them. And there are many established players who have a particular way of doing things, and sometimes it works and there's a lot to learn from that, and sometimes it doesn't work as well, and there's a lot to learn from that as well. And so I think that in particular, that dynamic just leads to even more disruption in this space. So, I do think that it is a complex space, and the beauty of that complexity is that there are so many different ways as a product owner to really participate in it and navigate through it. And there are so many different skill sets that can have such a positive impact within this space that I do personally find it very exciting and challenging in a new way all the time.
Thank you for the really thoughtful answers there. I'm sure most of our audience are excited about the areas of opportunity within fintech. Before we finish today, I'd love to ask each of you for one piece of advice that you would give our listeners today. It could be related to fintech, it could be related to product management, it could be related to just being a person or a woman in the workforce. What is the sort of one piece of advice you would like to impart upon everybody? And Shilpa, maybe we'll start with you this time.
Sure. My piece of advice is learning. Never stop learning. Always be learning. Be curious. Continue to learn. Adopt growth mindset. Everything is possible, doable, and continue to push yourself fearlessly.
Fantastic. Pavi.
My piece of advice is to network. Network as if your life depended on it. If that's what you want in your career, network. Use LinkedIn. There is no greater resource than LinkedIn for not just networking with people, networking in forums, articles. Take risks, right? So if you're able to take risks within your own organization, it's not necessary for you to go look for a new job. There are plenty of opportunities if your eyes are open for you to make a foray from engineering to product management to operations and whatnot. So exhaust all the resources you have at your current company, and definitely use LinkedIn as a resource to catch up on articles and to find out connections, common groups, and whatnot.
That's great. Mindy, what is your pearl of wisdom?
So mine is every year I set myself some personal development goals, and these are things that are professionally related but not specific to my exact role. And I refresh them at least once a month. And my advice is to carve out time every single day, even if it's just 10 minutes sometimes, but carve out time every single day doing something to advance on one of those goals. I don't think you need to have many of them, like even 2 or 3 is adequate. But whether it's gaining knowledge or reaching out to those individuals that you think could really help enrich you in that area, just spend a little bit of time there all the time. And it really does start to add up to something quite powerful quite quickly.
So I love that framing, using Mindy's goal setting. Perhaps everybody should set aside some time for learning and continuously evolving their skill set, and reaching out and building a network of like individuals and unlike individuals to gain wisdom from. And lastly, I'll just add to this great advice by saying, take your head up and look around. We all have a lot of value, and sometimes we need to look externally to realize our value. And so I encourage everybody to poke their head out, see what roles are available, see what their skill set lends them towards. To talk a little bit about what Shilpa said, follow your passion and your interest, and it makes getting up and going to work so much easier and better. I want to thank each of you for spending time with us today. This has been a really phenomenal conversation. I've learned a lot from each of you. I hope our audience has learned a lot about fintech and being a woman in product in the fintech environment. Thank you all, and looking forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Lisa, for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.